The untouchable True School Sports Empire proudly presents something the boxing game's been missing. Hey, what's going on? It's your boy BT, and I came here to talk some boxing with the thousands of True School Sports subscribers. Now, make sure y'all smash that like button. I wanted to give my thoughts on the Tony Harrison fight because Saturday there was a lot of hoopla going on in the boxing world. You know, I wound up somehow, by the grace of God, going to the Demetrius Andrade fight against Liam Williams. So that's been the main focus here on the channel. That's what I've been talking about. That's been the subject of many of my most recent videos. You know, Jake Paul and the circus came to town. You know, Jake Paul knocked out Ben Askren and exposed him, you know, as the MMA fighter that he is. You know, he ain't got no hand skills like that. So that got a lot of attention too, and I made a video about that as well. But I never got to this fight. This fight kind of slipped through the cracks. So let's talk about the PBC fight. Let's talk about Tony Harrison and Bryant Perrella. So this is the first fight for Tony Harrison since he got knocked out against CHARLO in the rematch. And it was a fight that he was supposed to not just win, but look good in. But what we found out in this fight was that it was a classic case of it being a trap fight. It was a trap fight for him. You know, you had a guy in Perrella with nothing to lose and everything to gain. And for Harrison, the complete opposite. He had nothing to gain and everything to lose. So a lot of times in those scenarios as a fighter, it's hard to really get up for those kind of occasions. And then factor in ring rust, factor in, I'm going to say ring rust. Like, I think this fight right here is a good example of you can never underestimate the value of activity and the value of being able to get rounds and stay sharp. Because this is my opinion. I think in this fight with Tony Harrison, you know, he could have easily lost a decision. I wasn't mad at the draw, but I think ring rust really hurt him here because from when I watched, I watched the fight at a bar. I went to Hooters after the Demetrius Andrade fight with my dad. So I watched this whole fight eating chicken wings at Hooters. And no audio, no sound. I'm just watching it on the screen. And as I'm watching it, I'm seeing Tony Harrison take a while to get into rhythm. I'm seeing him be kind of tentative to throw that right hand early on in the fight. And because of that, Perrella was able to, you know, win the battle of activity, you know, outland him in many of the early rounds and really set a good foundation for himself in the fight. And it wasn't until like round 7 or 8, like the back half of the fight, where Tony Harrison started to catch his rhythm. You know, I started to see Tony Harrison throw a double jab right hand, a right hand jab. You know, just the different combinations and the kind of combinations that make Tony Harrison one of the most skilled fighters at 154. So I thought he was very fortunate to get out of that fight with the draw. And I think a draw, considering how the fight played out, I think a draw for him is a very, very fortunate result. And I think he's got to actually run that back to Perrella. You know, I think the right thing to do would be to run that back because, you know, you can listen. Perrella, good fighter, solid fighter, competent professional fighter. I'm not gonna sit here and shit on Bryant Perrella or anything like that, but Bryant Perrella, he had a good win against Alex Martin, who just put on a masterclass, by the way, on the Virgil Ortiz Hooker undercard. So he's a solid welterweight, not an elite welterweight, but a solid welterweight, a competent welterweight. But when a solid, competent welterweight moves up and he's fighting a former world champion, a guy that is one of the most skilled fighters in his whole weight class, the guy who's one of the more skilled fighters in his weight class fighting a solid welterweight coming up in weight, he shouldn't just be winning. He shouldn't be looking good. So look, as much as I like Tony Harrison, as much as I respect Tony Harrison, he laid an egg. He laid an egg. And I think this fight is another classic case of what we're seeing in boxing right now. A lot of these top fighters, like, you know, we saw in the UK with Josh Warrington, they're suffering from, you know, ring rust. And, you know, you can never underestimate the value of activity in boxing. So I feel like if they were to run it back, Tony Harrison would beat him convincingly, because in the back half of that fight, I saw Tony Harrison getting into a great rhythm and fighting like the Tony Harrison we know he's all capable of being. What I will say about Tony Harrison is this. I think Tony Harrison should really, at some point in time, consider hiring someone who's a solid, established teacher of the sport that can give him good instructions in the corner. Because to my knowledge, he had in an interview I watched recently, he said that he has his family involved. Everybody who works for his team is part of his family, which is great. But I'm sorry, if you get a draw at Bryant Perrella, I think you got to evaluate everything. You got to reevaluate everything. And I mean, I'm not gonna tell a guy what he should or shouldn't do with his career, but it's a suggestion, you know, because that's honestly that is uncalled for, to be having a draw or be having fights that competitive with Bryant Perrella. When you're as skilled and as good as Tony Harrison is, and from a technical boxing standpoint, you should not, under any circumstances, be having competitive fights with Bryant Perrella. So I'm not going to condemn him. I'm not going to call him a bad fighter or anything like that, because I know that's what people in boxing would do. People who don't have any respect for fighters in boxing, they do that. But I'm not going to do that. I understand that in boxing, especially for Tony Harrison, because I've watched his career, sometimes you fight up and down to your level of competition. In fact, I would say that most fighters in boxing, the lion's share of fighters in boxing, fight up and down to the level of competition. It's very seldom you see guys, you know, stay here and be consistent fight after fight after fight. It's only those like those guys like, you know, CHARLO and Floyd Mayweather and Pacquiao, guys like that do that every fight, which is why they're so great and why they're so special. But that's rare. So, you know, he's gotta right that wrong. But for Perrella, this is great. I think this is a great, probably the best thing that could have happened to Perrella. You know, maybe he could have got a decision. Who knows? But he put up a very, very great effort coming up in weight against a former world champion at 154. His first fight at 154. His first fight with Roy Jones Jr. So shout out to Bryant Perrella, man. I'm happy for him. You know, hopefully if they don't run the Tony Harrison fight back, hopefully now he can get some more opportunities and continue to progress his career forward, because Perella's a good fighter. You know, any welterweight that can beat in Alex Martin by UD is nobody to scoff at or say they're trash. You know, he's a good fighter, and I'm happy for him doing big things there. This was actually Perella's first fight with Roy Jones Jr. For those of you who don't know, he was up there in Pensacola working with Roy Jones Jr. And I believe he might have even been in the gym at the same time as my boy James Crunch Time Wilkins. So shout out to James Crunch Time Wilkins. He's definitely a friend of the channel. And shout out to Bryant Perrella for not just coming there to put up a good fight, but putting himself in a great position to win the fight. Unfortunately, the judges didn't see it that way. So that's my little synopsis on the fight. And yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Make sure you take the time to subscribe. And like I say in every single one of these videos, you can love me or you can hate me, but I'm just giving Daniel. So until next time, take care, guys.